Okay, great. Hi everyone. Hope you've had a great day and looking forward to the weekend. You've seen before that my name's Adrian Nellums. I'm an IFMJ mountain guide. I'm also director of the International School of Mountaineering here in Kendal, running courses in the Alps as well as places further afield. We also run rock climbing in the UK, both for beginners and also those people that want to sort of develop those skills further and want to get more into sort of climbing themselves. But I want to say a sort of special thanks to Arc'teryx for sort of pulling this webinar together in conjunction with the kind of Arc'teryx Access to Climb campaign. And also many thanks to Victoria, who's been in the background there, sort of supporting me for this event. So thanks to her as well. But as for most of us, restrictions are now easing, and we've got this sort of vaccination rollout that's really successful here in the UK. We've got this sort of change of weather that we're seeing in front of us. We're all starting to think about maybe going climbing again and accessing some of those outdoor spaces. And so with that in mind, and with climbing in mind, I would start to think about taking advantage of the climbing walls and bouldering gyms that are opening next week. They're a great source to sort of mix with others and get back into things on a sort of social level, meeting friends, building those relationships. But it's also a great way to refresh some of those skills. And that's, your own climbing skills in terms of your climbing movement, your footwork, and gaining a little bit of fitness, but also refreshing those sort of basic climbing skills, if you like, such as how to belay, how to tie in, putting on that harness again. And a lot of those things we take for granted as sort of good habits through climbing. And I think it's important to remember to sort of start refreshing those skills again, because, a lot of us won't have been climbing now for some time because of restrictions, because of lockdown due to COVID. And I think a great way to kind of get back into thinking about climbing is to get down to your local climbing wall, get down to your local bouldering gym, and start getting into that sort of groove again of climbing and refreshing some of those basic skills and good habits. And like I say, it's a great way also to sort of meet others. And for those people that have never been climbing before, I think climbing walls, indoor climbing gyms are a great way to sort of get into climbing for the first time, especially bouldering. I mean, bouldering is a way where you sort of generally mixing with others. It's very, very sociable. You can strike up conversations. If you need help on a particular problem, there's that help there. And then you can move into sort of roped climbing. And climbing walls are a great resource, for giving instruction in that sort of basic roped climbing, where that's how to tie onto a harness, how to put on a harness, and how to what we call top rope and belay each other as we're sort of climbing. So I would sort of really take advantage of climbing walls opening up next week and getting down there and refreshing some of those sort of basic skills and sort of going climbing again. And then I think, as part of that sort of staged return to going climbing outdoors, we need to really have a look at our kit and sort through your sort of climbing kit. Now, here in the Lake District, we've got a mixture of both traditional route climbing as well as some sort of sport climbing. Now, when I say traditional is whereby you need to place your own protection as you're climbing the routes. And that protection might be wires and cams, but they're protection and safety pieces of equipment that we put in the rock as we're climbing those routes. It's a very sort of traditional method. I'll go up first and I'll place that equipment, and then the person following me will take that equipment out as they come up the climb. And we also have quite a lot of sport climbs in the Lake District. And sport climbing is maybe more akin to what you do indoors, which is clipping bolts as you climb up the rock. Now, the traditional climbs in the Lake District here are typically on that sort of volcanic rock that you find in many of the sort of mountain areas here in the Lake District, whereas the sport climbing tends to be on very steep limestone, or maybe in some of the slate quarries, or maybe we've got a great venue over on the East Coast at a place called St. Bees. And they're all kind of sport climbing venues where you've got bolts that you clip as you climb those routes. But I would say on the whole, if you're coming to the Lake District, most people will be traditional climbing. So you need to be really giving thought to that sort of climbing rack that you carry when you're trad climbing. Now, I had a question from Rachel asking me about, what do I need in my trad climbing rack? How do I start building that rack? And it's a really sort of, big conversation in itself, because if I go trad climbing, say on the Gritstone down in Derbyshire, my rack might look very different to maybe the rock climbing here in the Lake District. But if we just keep it to sort of rock climbing here in the lakes, I know for myself, my own experience, the volcanic rock here, really gives us good protection by us placing wires. So for instance, a trad rack, the equipment I carry when I climb those trad routes, will be, a double rack of wires. So from small to large, and I'll have 2 sets of those. And those wires fit into kind of funnel shaped cracks, and they wedge in, and I'll place those on the lead. And if I've got a double set of those wires, then it leaves me a second wire the same size for maybe a crack higher up the climb, or when I get to the top, I can then set up a belay, which is joining anchors together to fix myself to then bring up my partner to follow on after me. So I've got wires, a double set of, and then I've got like a selection of cams. And cams, fit into these sort of more parallel shaped cracks, with lobes that fold back and slide into those cracks. So I'll have a selection of cams, as well as a really good selection of quick draws. And a quick draw is a tape with 2 carabiners on either end. I'll clip that onto a wire or a cam, and then the other carabiner I'll clip into my rope to safeguard me as I'm climbing. So, I'll have a selection of quick draws, from short ones to ones that I can also extend. As the route that I climb winds its way up the rock face, and it allows me to extend for that rope then to run nice and smoothly. I'll also have a selection of long slings and sort of screw gate carabiners then for either during the climb or when I get to the top to make that anchor really safe. So we've been rock climbing a little bit indoors. We've got a feel for it again. If we're first timers and want to give climbing a go, book a session down at the indoor climbing wall on how to put on a harness, to tie on, and how to belay. And then as we move outdoors, certainly coming to the Lake District, a large amount of that climbing is going to be trad climbing. So you're going to need a rack, and that rack is what I've just been talking about, which is that double set of wires, a selection of cams, some quick draws, some long slings for setting up those anchors, and obviously the ropes I'm going to attach myself and my partner connect themselves to actually climb that rock. So trad climbing, there's quite a lot of kit actually that you need to carry, and also that second following you up needs to take that gear out, as they climb. So that's a little bit about, your rack, although there's a lot more detail to it. I've just given you sort of a bit of an idea there. But if you do have a rack, what you need to be doing now is just checking that rack is in good order. Make sure that, the fabric items, the textiles, are in good condition. If a sling or your harness looks furry, then, you need to replace those items. Anything that really looks worn or is old and maybe coming up to being out of date, you need to think about replacing. Or you might think about adding to that rack, because you're coming to the lakes and you might be climbing elsewhere, you might need a few more cams or a few more wires, so that when you stand at the bottom of a climb, you feel really well prepared to sort of safeguard yourself as best you can as you're climbing that pitch of rock that's there in front of you. But if you do need any help with any climbing gear, any equipment, and any clothing, we do have some sort of great outdoor shops here in the Lake District, such as the Epicenter and also the Climbers Shop in Ambleside. And when I say Ambleside really is the sort of, one of the main hubs for the rock climbing here in the South Lakes. The other hub being, Keswick in the North Lakes. So, if you're coming into the lakes from the south, you'll be maybe driving through to Ambleside, which gives you great access to some superb crags, both valley and mountain, that you can go and access. But in terms of equipment, you've got some great outdoor shops there, and they're a great resource for both help and assistance in what climbing kit you're going to need, any sort of clothing, and sort of advice as well. So if I was coming up to the lakes to go climbing, I might visit one of those shops. They might give me a help with where to find the best weather forecasts. They might help with some local knowledge on crags, and those kinds of things. So really use those shops as a bit of a resource, as well as somewhere that you can kind of buy the clothing or outdoor equipment. So you've sort of checked your kit, you've had a couple of sessions, you're now ready to go in terms of sort of planning ahead and booking somewhere. Now, like I said, Ambleside and Keswick are those sort of central hubs. And I think this year, more than any other year, and you'll be aware of this with COVID and restrictions and people possibly not traveling abroad, they are going to be holidaying here in the UK. So, if you are keen on coming up to the lakes to go rock climbing, you really need to give thought to the dates you come in with your sort of climbing partner. And then you really need to get onto booking, somewhere to stay here in the lakes, because I think it will really be busy. But the great thing about the lakes is that there's loads of really good campsites, caravan parks. There's a number of youth hostels spread across the lakes as well as sort of B&Bs. So, have a really good rummage around. But I would advise booking somewhere really early if you are coming up to the lakes. And just be mindful as well is that if you are struggling to find somewhere to stay, just bear in mind that I live here in Kendal, and for me, the lakes is super accessible and on my doorstep. So just think out of the box a little bit. If you can't find somewhere in Ambleside or up near Keswick or somewhere close by, just by sort of moving that bit further afield, you can still access some fantastic climbing in the lakes and experience what the lakes has to offer, but staying just outside the lakes, and that's absolutely fine. So in terms of the sort of rock climbing crags, as I said to you, we've got some great trad climbing, as we have sort of some sport climbing as well. And that's a whole range of single pitch climbs. So that's climbs that you can go from bottom and top in one rope length. And we've also got some great multi-pitch rock climbing as well on more mountain crags that give you that sort of, big mountain experience. So, we really do have crags and routes to suit all levels of ability and grades. So there's plenty out there to go at. And there are a really good couple of resources that you can access. And one is the FRCC website, and that's the Felon Rock Climbing Club website. And the Felon Rock Club, they've been producing guidebooks now for the lakes for many, many years. And that's a great resource on their website, but also that production of guidebooks covering the whole of the Lake District. And a guidebook is something that you can purchase. It gives all the routes, the climbs, the crags. And not only that, it will tell you the grades of the climbs, how the grades relate to other climbing. It will give you some information on any access issues to some crags. It'll help with maybe parking and where to park and access, but also it might tell you about maybe restrictions with regards birds, bird nestings and bird restrictions. So those guidebooks are a great resource for anything sort of climbing related, not just the crags, the climbing, who made the first ascents of those routes and a little bit of history, but also how to access those crags, and maybe any problems or bird restrictions relating to that. So they produce some fantastic guidebooks, and I've actually got one guidebook here that the Felon Rock Club produce. It's the Lake District Rock guidebook. And the reason I'm sort of suggesting this as a guidebook, if you're coming to the Lake District for the first time, is that it's a guidebook and it's a selected guide. So it gives a great selection of any number of routes across the whole of the Lake District, just picking out some really good crags and some sort of key routes within that. So if you are looking at purchasing a guidebook to help you rock climbing here in the lakes, then that Lake District Rock Climbing Guide, you know, by the FRCC is a great guide to purchase. If you do climb already and you've been here once or twice and you're looking for some sort of motivation or inspiration, you know, recently I've been actually looking at a lot of routes from this guidebook here, and it's a compilation by a guy called Ken Wilson, and it's called Classic Rock. Now, this is the first edition that I've got here, but it has been reprinted. But this, you know, I've really got absorbed in this over the last couple of months, actually. It's a selected compilation by Ken Wilson, you know, his best routes that he thinks, both in the Lake District, in North Wales, in Scotland, and maybe the rest of the UK. But if you peruse this, it really takes you back to those early ascents, those early pioneers, and those early climbers having those adventures. There's some great storytelling in there. And all the routes in Classic Rock are all of a very low and moderate grade. And that'd be a great thing to inspire you to have as a sort of coffee table book to sort of look through and give you some ideas about some rock climbing and crags to go and visit whilst up here in the lakes. And it might also get you to some areas that, you know, are less trodden and maybe that little bit quieter as well. So, you know, you've got the classic, you've got the Lake District Rock Guidebook by the Felon Rock. That's a great resource. And then you've also got this Classic Rock compilation. It's an iconic kind of coffee table book, if you like, by the late Ken Wilson. Again, very inspiring for routes and crags here in the Lake District, as it is for you know, climbing in North Wales and Scotland. But if you are coming up to the lakes for the first time, you've never tried climbing outdoors, you know, you don't have to necessarily start indoors. You can book a course. For instance, we deliver introductions to outdoor climbing here at ISM, as do other providers. And we also offer, you know, courses in and coaching in developing your sort of lead climbing skills or developing your existing skills to become that much more independent when you're rock climbing outdoors. So, you know, ISM offer those sorts of courses, as other providers do. And I've mentioned the Epicenter and the Climber Shop in Ambleside as examples of, you know, really good independent retailers for kit. But also they're a great resource. If you come to the lakes and you're looking for a day or two rock climbing, you know, you can visit those shops and they maybe help steer you with, you know, into linking up with some local instructors or mountain guides to take you up, you know, maybe out on that sort of first day, that first experience of outdoor rock climbing, or like I say, developing those existing skills, you know, that you've already got to maybe become that much more independent in your own climbing. Well, one point I would like to sort of say and emphasize is that for many of us, we won't have been rock climbing outdoors for many, many months. And for me and everybody, I think, we're not going to be as current climbing outdoors as maybe we were, you know, when we sort of stopped climbing at the end of last summer. So I just want you to sort of really bear that in mind, you know, when you're planning your sort of first climbing trip. Because I do think it's going to take more time placing gear. It's going to take more time rigging anchors, you know, managing the ropes, etc. Because we're not going to be as current as we were, like I say. And I do think going to the climb wall to start with will kind of get you back into the groove of things. But what I would also say is that when you are coming climbing outdoors, it wouldn't hurt, you know, to do the first route or two and maybe a grade easier than what you were climbing when you left off it. It just puts you under a bit less pressure and a little bit less stress to be able to climb that route well, to place the gear that you need to place safely, and to start rebuilding those sort of good habits again. And what I mean by good habits, it's good habits in terms of getting your harness on, checking each other's harnesses, tying your figure of 8 knots into the harness, connecting yourself to the rope, checking each other, you know, having good belay technique, and then getting into those good habits of placing the correct gear on the lead, clipping the quick draws and then your rope to that, and then having time at the top of the crag to set up a really safe anchor to then bring up your partner as well. So just allow a little bit more time in the day for that, and don't get stressed being on a route that's maybe too hard too soon. So just take your time kind of getting back into climbing outdoors again. I mean, I've been out a few times, you know, more recently with this better weather, and I've definitely done that. I've taken more time with my rope work, you know, and the anchors I've linked together, you know, I've double checked them, just getting into those good habits again, you know, which really underpin the sort of safety in us going out climbing outdoors. So just a sort of bit of a reflect, we've got into the groove of things, we've checked gear, we've planned dates, we're booking accommodation because it's super busy, and then we're kind of getting inspired with some routes, you know, at the right grade initially, and building on that grade. For those people that haven't been out climbing before, you know, are maybe thinking about booking a day, booking a weekend, just to get that sort of basing instruction so you can then go out and maybe enjoy outdoor climbing for the first time. And when we've parked at the crag, we're thinking about, you know, where we're parking sensibly, and we're thinking about the sort of country code as well, because there is a lot more pressure on these outdoor spaces in the UK, more so this last year and this coming summer than we've seen in a long time with people not traveling abroad. So just thinking about the parking, thinking about other users, and thinking about that sort of bigger picture of being at the crag. Now, once you are parked at the crag and you're sort of walking in, make sure you've got your helmet at the top of your rucksack, because that's the biggest difference, you know, to climbing indoors and outdoors, is the outdoor mountain environment and the bigger risk that, you know, is associated with that. So as soon as you're walking in and as soon as that ground's steepening up and you've got the sort of crag in front of you, get your helmet on nice and early. You know, you probably won't need it, but the biggest hazard, you know, at the crags, you know, when it is busy, it is other people. And it's really easy to knock a rock down, you know, inadvertently, or drop a piece of gear or something like that while you're trying to place it. It's really easy to do. And by putting a helmet on nice and early, it just protects you from something like that. And the other thing to bear in mind as well, if you're at the crags really early season, we've had quite a long winter and it's been very, very cold here in the lakes. We've had quite a bit of snow, some ice. We've had some good ice climbing and some good mixed climbing, which is snow, ice and rock. But what that means is that, you know, the water and moisture gets into the cracks, you know, and it expands. And an early rock climbing season, there might be the odd loose block around that was welded, you know, secure last summer. So be really aware of, you know, you're in the outdoors now, maybe checking your handholds are secure on what you're sort of standing on as well. More so early season, as things are getting kind of cleaned up as the sort of season progresses. So you're going out to the crag for the first time, get a helmet on early, be aware of other crag users, because it's people at the crag typically that are the biggest hazard. You know, and be aware of when you're climbing the sort of rock that you're climbing on, and you know, give thought to that sort of bigger picture of you now being in that bigger mountain environment. I had a good question from Matt actually, which is, you know, how to set up a top rope, and really, I mean, that's a conversation in itself, and really, the easiest thing for me to say would be, you know, come on a course and I'll be able to give you loads of instruction on how to set up a top rope, and we can do it safely. But if I kind of had to sort of summarize things, the first point is that if you're going to go and top rope a crag, and for those that don't know what top rope and a crag is that if you go to a climbing wall, the rope goes from the bottom up to an anchor and then back down again. And so one person holds the rope securely with a belay device, and you're attached to the other end of the rope, tied in to your harness. And so as you climb up, the person takes in the rope, which is belaying, and they'll belay you up, keeping that rope nice and tight. When you get to the top, they'll lower you back down again. Now we can simulate that on an outdoor crag. So the key thing is choosing the right crag to do that. So you want a single pitch crag where your rope is long enough to go from the bottom to the top and back down again. So typically you'll be buying a 50-meter or 60-meter rope to go rock climbing with. So if it's a 50-meter rope, you need to make sure that the crag that you choose is a maximum of maybe 20 meters, 22 meters in height. So you've chosen this crag, it's a single pitch crag, and you can access it easy from one side or the other, and you can get to the top easy. Now, the first thing I'd say is, the most important thing is you at the top of the crag. So you need to really look after yourself while you're moving yourself around the top of the crag. So you need to tie yourself in securely before you start setting up any anchors or playing with any ropes. So you look after yourself. And once you've done that, you're secure at the top, there's a big tree at the top. So what we can do is we can put a rope around the tree and then hang that rope over the edge of the crag to set up an anchor that the rope can go up and down through. Now, typically, I'll use 2 anchors at the top of a crag, and they'll be equalized, so the weight comes onto both evenly. But in this example, there's a really big tree there. It's super secure, it's live, it's really healthy. And what I'll do is I'll put a rope around that tree and connect it securely with a good knot. Now, the rope I use is a static rope, and it's not a climbing rope. A climbing rope has lots of elasticity in it, so that if somebody does fall off, the weight of them gets taken, the shock of it gets taken in the rope, and the person falling off, are not jarred too much. Whereas a static rope, there's hardly any stretch in it. And so I use a static rope at the top around the tree to drape over the edge. Because if my weight comes on and off of that static rope, there's no stretching of the rope over the edge. There's no soaring of the rope over the edge. So if I put a static rope around the tree and I hang it over the edge with a screw gate carabiner, I protect that rope with a rope protector, so it's really safe and secure from that edge. And then I connect the rope from the bottom through a carabiner and down. That's a great setup for a top rope scenario. The key points is looking after yourself at the top of the crag. You choose really safe and secure anchors. In this example, it's a tree. And typically for setups, use and get into the habit of using static ropes. So those static ropes are non-stretch, and they allow you to safely rig an anchor over the edge for a rope to come up and through, for you to then have a play on practicing the sort of climb on that crag as you want to. And that can be a great way of you and your mates or you and your partner to go to a crag, set up and go climbing in a really fun way to get some fitness, to get used to belaying each other. And then also that it really enables you for that next step of getting used to placing a little bit of gear. Now, you don't need to be on the lead to do that. And when I say on the lead, it means I'm standing at the bottom, my person holding the ropes at the bottom, and I start at the bottom and go up. So if I were to fall off, I put some protection in, I'm going to fall down below that protection. The more protection I put in, the less distance I'm going to fall. But I am going to fall. That's the nature of trad climbing or sport climbing. If you do make a mistake, your hand pulls off or you get tired, you will fall down. But by placing gear or having bolts in, it minimizes the distance you fall. So just be aware of that. And if you want to practice placing gear without the sense of possibly falling off, you can be top roped with the rope nice and tight, but practicing putting pieces of gear in. And that can be a really nice stepping stone to you thinking, actually, I might be able to go and lead that climb. And if you can maybe put 2 or 3 key pieces of protection in, stand at the bottom, and then fill the gaps, by you placing gear. But in the security of mind that you've got those really secure pieces on the way up to a point where you can lead it from bottom to top. So, top roping is a great way of accessing climbing, without too much risk, or as a really nice stepping stone to maybe go in lead climbing in the future. And also, top roping, again, it's instilling these, I go on it again, but these good habits, while you're putting your harness on, don't get distracted by others around you. Make sure you've got it on, make sure you've got it secure. Does the buckle need doubling back or not, or does it get pulled tight? Don't let people interrupt you in that process. or in the process of you tying onto a rope. I've seen it before where, I've asked somebody to tie on a rope. Another person has said, can you pass me this? Can you pass me that? They've half done the knot. They've got distracted. They've given them a drink or some food, and they've not gone back to it because their mind's elsewhere. They're outdoors for the first time, or haven't been outdoors for ages. The views are amazing. So good habits are, don't let anybody distract you putting your harness and your rope on and tying a knot on the end of the rope to connect yourself securely to that rope, because that's some of the most important things you'll do that day, and then help that person whatever they need to do. So good habits, instilling good habits, checking each other, as you do that, and using that sort of buddy system to do that as much as you can. And I do like the fact of, the more I get to know a client, or the more I get to know a friend, or the more you climb together as partners or pairs or whatever, the more you get to know each other. And I think, that's quite special when you're working together a bit more in sync, but you are instinctively looking after each other, while you're at the crag, and really going over these good habits that underpin a sort of safe climbing day, if you like. And another question, actually, is from Lewis. Actually, it's which indoor technique do you find easiest to carry over to outdoor climbing? And I think, I've mentioned before about going indoor climbing. As soon as the walls open up next week, get into it, get into the groove, get inspired. And a trip will spawn from that, whether it be you climbing or meeting others that are inspired. But I do think climbing walls and bouldering gyms are great for climbing movement, because that's the same as outside. It's about balance and body position as you're sort of moving around, the indoor climbing wall or bouldering gym, and it's exactly the same as outdoors. And I think also it really helps with timing and holding holes and just that sort of basic climbing technique, as well as sort of building up that sort of general fitness, for you to sort of climb outdoors. And I have to say, if you climb indoors first, that might give you a little bit of a guide to how well or how not so well you're climbing. And then that might then prompt, the grades that you start climbing at outdoors, which outdoors takes 5 times as long to climb a route than it does indoors. Indoors, I might follow a yellow route, up to the top of the climb, and it might take me, 2 or 3 minutes. That same pitch of rock, if not climbed outside, could take me 45 minutes. I'm standing there. Where's the next hold? How does it feel? Where do I want to put my feet? Okay, that I need another piece of gear because the last piece of gear is by my feet. Does a bit of gear fit in there? No, it doesn't. Does it fit here? It takes time, so you need a little bit of fitness on the lead. And so going to the climb wall will improve that and also give you an indication where you are with that. And I think, also your partner, the person holding your ropes, needs to also understand that trad climbing is a timely thing. It will take time. So don't get frustrated or rush your partner leading, even though you think, well, you should be climbing, or she should be climbing a little bit quicker than they are. Let them take their time. We're new into it for the season, but also it takes time generally anyway. So there's a lot of crossovers from indoor climbing and outdoor climbing, apart from that familiarity with those basic skills, which is if you're rope climbing indoors, you're putting on a harness, you're tying into the end of the rope, you're belaying safely, you're managing the rope, and you're looking after each other while you're doing that. So just those sort of basic core skills and that sort of basic movement does cross over, really well to outdoor climbing. And if I skip down a little bit, I think another question I've got here is from James, and it sort of says, what's the most important equipment to buy when moving towards outdoor climbing? And again, that's really hard actually, because indoor climbing, I've probably bought a harness and I've got a belay plate. I may or may not have a rope because I might use a rope at the climbing gym, but I might have a rope, so you will need a rope. The biggest and most important thing about climbing indoors is the rubber under your feet and the climbing shoes. They don't have to be climbing shoes that hurt your feet and you can't walk properly in. you know, they need to be snug, they need to be well fitting, they don't want to be baggy, because when you do stand on the smaller edge, you want to be standing on your foot, so it gives you that security and confidence to stand up and use your feet, because a lot of climbing is all about footwork, whether you're on a steep overhanging wall or whether you're on a steep face, you know, even if it's easy angled slab, it's all about feet. So making sure you've got good rubber under your feet, and make sure they've got a bit of shape to them as well. But importantly, they fit, they're snug, but they don't really hurt your feet. Okay, so it's just getting that balance right. And you're going to have to try on probably 3 or 4 or 5 different types of shoes. I mean, I can tell you what shoes I wear, but you know, that's only part of the puzzle. They've got to fit your feet and they've got to be reasonably comfy, apart from just being tight. The other crossover, I would say, the most important thing really, and I've mentioned it before, from indoor wall climbing to outdoors, you know, it's the helmet. You know, you purchase a helmet, you know, it's a signal of that transition to climbing in from indoors to outdoors. It's accepting that, you know, there's an element of risk to climbing outdoors, whether that's walking up a track and tripping over blocks or rocks, but there's also that bigger and steeper environment around us, and it's being aware of that. So add on to that list, that helmet that you pack near your rucksack at the top there, so you can get in and you can access it without thinking it's at the bottom of a rucksack, it's a hassle, I won't bother till I get at the base of the crag. No, put it on nice and early. And I think while you're doing that as well, that slows everybody down. You and your partner are now standing there looking at the crag, you're putting your helmet on, and you're now thinking, where's the route we want to climb? Because the guidebook will show you a picture where the route's going, but actually when you're in the crag really close by, you can't see that bigger picture of the crag and its layout and where routes are. So it also gives you a chance to take stock. Where's our route? You know, and where also importantly are other people climbing. So when I go to a crag, I don't just go to a crag and think I'm going to go and climb this route and this is the only route I want to climb. I'll go there with a couple of routes in mind so that I don't get stressed and flustered because somebody else is on my route or they're just starting up it. I wanted to get on it and it rushes me to get behind them and become a bit of a hazard directly behind them and stress. So I've got a couple of routes in mind at any crag I go to, so I've got flexibility in case there's others there, you know, or if that route's not in condition, it's maybe wet or it's not as dry as it was, or there's others on it. So the helmet signals going outdoors, but also it's a great way of stopping early on at the crag, looking up, checking out the environment around you, where people are, where your route goes, so you're more informed and you can better make judgments and decisions on where to go and sort of what to do. Another question over here from Sarah, actually, it says, how do people set routes on rock for the first time? I mean, who puts the bolts in? Well, putting bolts in is very much on a specific type of crag. So in the Lake District, like I've said, we've got limestone crags, we've got slate quarries, and we've got the sandstone over on the east coast of St Bees, and they're all bolted climbs, they're all sport routes. And anybody that puts up a sport route is allowed to then bolt those routes. So on areas that have been given up to being bolted, and it's accepted that those crags are bolted, then if I go to a blank wall and I think there's a line there, I might put a top rope up, I might try and climb that route. If I think it's going to lend itself to a good quality climb, you know, I might then put some bolts in that climb because it's accepted the crag can be bolted. I'll lead it cleanly, I'll get to the top, and I can then give it a grade, I can give it a name, and I'll be then tagged as doing the first ascent. And that's the same process as if I was climbing on the sort of volcanic rock here in the Central Lakes, you know, on the mountain crags. You know, if I'm working a route on a sort of blank bit of wall where there aren't existing climbs, you know, I'll work that route, or I might just do it from the bottom up, what they call on-site. I'll on-site it, I'll just go there and do it. And if I do it cleanly, I place my own gear as I go up, I climb plaster gear, I put wires and cams in as I'm climbing up. If I get to the top without falling off, then I can grade that route, I can give it a name, and in time as guidebooks get republished, my name will appear in that, the route will, the grade, and it'll be there then for others to do. And if I go back to those resources, which is the FRCC, and the UKC, which is a UK Climbing. It's a website and a forum. Both those places are good resources to, I can put on the FRCC website that it's a new route, the grade and everything else. And, others can see that, and then they can go along and do those routes until a new publication of the guide comes out. And I think UKC is a great resource as well, because the more those climbs get climbed, those routes get climbed, then those grades get really honed. And there's a UK grading system that I won't go to now, but it's very, very incremental. And you can just step by step, work your way through the grades if you want to increase the grade and develop your climbing and get stronger and better. There's a really good grading system, and on the UKC website, some climbs that are graded X might be honed down with 1,000 people of traffic, that it's a slightly different grade, or it's confirmed that it is the grade. So on the sort of classic routes and the routes that get climbed a lot, those grades now are quite accurate. So you can very incrementally build your climbing ability, your strength, your knowledge, your experience, and work your way through the grades as you sort of climb up. And the lakes is fantastic for both those valley-based crags as well as the mountain crags for single and multi-pitch climbing, to really develop your climbing, gain those experiences, and develop as a sort of climber in itself. The next question here is from Preet. What do people generally find most difficult about outdoor climbing? And that's a good question, actually, because a lot of people will have been indoor climbing, but not outdoor climbing. And the thing I have to tell everybody to do when they come outdoor climbing with me is to slow down. And I've said it before, outdoor climbing takes time. You need to feel your way up the rock. How do I hold that hold? How can I use that crack to get to that next edge? How do I unlock this next section? Whereas if you're an indoor wall climber, you're really used to following a set of coloured holds. So that's telling you where to go. There's no other options. I'll go to my local climber wall here in Kendal, and I'll maybe follow a yellow route. And like I said, I can get up that yellow route within a minute or two by following those yellow holds. And so I can climb really quickly. But going outside, you just slow down. Don't feel like you're going slow. You're probably not. You're just used to going quite quickly when you're climbing indoors. So slow it right down, because it's going to take time for you to work out where those holds are if you've not done that climb before, or place the gear, or set up belays and anchors. So just slow it down. And the other thing I would say is to really have confidence in your feet. I guess that's the same with all climbing, indoors and outdoors. You just really have confidence in the footwear you've got. You've purchased some really nice, rock climbing shoes. Have confidence in them. Outdoors as well, standing on that real rock outdoors, that the edge will hold. The rubber's really grippy. Even on the sort of flatter surface, it's going to give you a lot of grip. So confidence in your feet, standing on those edges is so important. That's why your footwear and good fitting footwear is so important as well. So, most difficult thing is just slow things down, take your time, and get some good footwear for when you are climbing outdoors. And the big other point I've noted actually is, for everybody, there's a lot more exposure climbing outdoors. You've got maybe on a crag, a really big open space, the ground drops below you quite steeply. It does feel more exposed. If it's a multi-pitch route, you're now standing on a ledge as you're belaying me or your partner climbing that next pitch. It's great and fantastic for views, and looking around you. But for some people, it will feel, a bit, this is steep. It feels more exposed, and it will take time developing that for some people. And that's why, moving on easier ground, taking your time, and getting onto that multi-pitch terrain, is great. And doing it incrementally. The stepping stones are top roping or single pitch, going to sort of multi-pitch climbing, and the lakes as all of those crags, and it is a great place to access. Talking about access, there was a question here, I forget who it was from now, But anyway, talking about how do I access the lakes if I don't have a car. Now, I have to say, we're very lucky that Kendal here, where I live, is on the main line, and even from Euston, you can get to Kendal in, 2 hours 40 minutes, fairly direct, with just a couple of stops to Kendal, which is Oxenholme, and then from Oxenholme, there's a really quiet railway line that takes you through Burneside, Staveley, and into Windermere, and then from Windermere, you can actually take a bus into Ambleside. And from Ambleside, there's a really easy bus that's a regular bus that accesses what they call the Great Langdale Valley. And the Great Langdale Valley is a beautiful valley here in the sort of South Lakes. It's a valley with lots of, mountain crags as well as single pitch crags. The bus can drop you off, you can access those crags, and then you can get the last bus back again. So you can access much of the climbing here in the lakes by the train and then jumping on a local bus to do that. So that can work, and it can work really well. Somebody else asked me about finding climbing partners within the climate we're in. And, it's forums, you can find climbing partners. You can book on courses, and you might book on a course with sort of like-minded people as well. Again, indoor climbing walls. I mean, I never had them when I was growing up, and I was relying on a really small group of people to go climbing with. But I go down the climbing wall now and I go bouldering. I might not know 20 people in the bouldering gym, but I'll go up there and it's a really social place. People are kicking around. I might struggle on a problem. Somebody will say, oh, I did this. Have you tried this? Have you tried that? I might promote the same conversation with somebody else. It's a really nice environment to sort of build relationships, friendships, and who knows, a sort of climbing trip might spawn from that, or maybe some rope climbing in indoor wall might spawn from that as well. So that's really healthy. Mountaineering clubs and climbing clubs, they're around as well that you can maybe tap into. So there are ways of linking up with other people as well, which can work. Another question here with Toby, which was how do I split my time between projects in the UK and Canada? I'll just briefly sort of mention that as an IFMJ mountain guide, apart from running a business here, which is ISM, I work as a full-time guide. And so my winters, typically I'll be over in the Alps and I'll be ice climbing in January through into February. And then I'll head over to Canada for a month and go icefall climbing over there. And then after that sort of block, I'll then come back. I've got a family here. It's where my home is here in Kendal. And I'll have this as a base then for almost sort of UK rock climbing. And I'll be doing that pretty much in the spring, all spring into early summer. And then when the summer season in the Alps kicked off, I'll then go over to the Alps and we'll be running sort of summer alpine mountaineering courses for beginners, accessing the Alps for the first time, walking on glaciers for the first time and climbing their first 4,000ers, through to people that want to develop those skills or want to get onto harder peaks with some private guiding. And then at the end of the summer, I'll run typically over the last 20 years, I've been running a trip to Kyrgyzstan, accessing unclimbed areas and regions, making first ascents, and then with the autumn back here in the UK. So it's a really varied year for me. Obviously, the last 12 months, 14 months, has been, very difficult in that, this nomadic lifestyle you live has changed massively. I've watched the grass grow at home and I've cut it 4 or 5 times. But, what spawned out of that actually is I probably feel now is that I'm rock climbing better than I ever have been, because over the last 12 months, I've had a chance to really structure that training and focus on, my own climbing, being away all the time, where people say to me as a mountain guide, you must be a fantastic climber. I mean, I climb well, but in the winter I'm ice climbing, in the UK I'm rock climbing, and in the summer alpine mountaineering. So it does really draw on lots of different skill sets. Alpine mountaineering is a lot more aerobic, carrying a rucksack with an element of rock climbing. But I've really sort of pushed my own climbing standard, feel as I'm climbing as well as I was in my 30s now, through being in sort of lockdown. So I'm going to enjoy, as you guys, hopefully getting into the lakes with this better weather, planning trips and going climbing and really sort of enjoying all of that. So hopefully this is sort of a little bit about me. in that as well. I guess the timing's getting on a little bit, and I have been going on a little bit, but I wanted to also mention, if you are wanting to get into climbing, you want to develop some skills. I help a lady, Katie Whitaker, and we're part of an Arc'teryx team that run the Arc'teryx Big Weekend. And every year we run a weekend, and it's a weekend of clinics and workshops. They're half day each, and they're for people wanting to try give climbing a go for the first time, through to developing skills, through to coaching in lead climbing or bouldering. A couple of years ago, we ran some, open water swimming in one of the lakes here, and we'll be running some running classes, some trail running classes. So really varied, but very much rock climbing focused. And over the last few years, we've got a number of them now. It's been in May, but we've put that back to some dates in the summer. Now, I'm not too sure if we've agreed those dates yet, but I would keep your eyes peeled for the Arc'teryx Big Weekend. It's a fantastic weekend. It's really grassroots. It's basically, you meet some guides. It's a team from ISM. You go away for half days on little workshops that you signed up to. You come back and there's a brew. There's some food in the evening, with a fire pit, and it's a really nice sort of social weekend, but loads of skills. It's really cheap for folk to join in. And again, it's a great way to possibly meet people, for those sort of long lasting relationships and partnerships. So keep an eye open for that this summer. It's well worth it. I'll also say that, next week, the climber wall's open, as well as the shops do as well. It's great to see the shops coming back online, being open. I've said they're a great resource. And to sort of kick that off, that, the Epicenter and Arc'teryx have come together, and we're going to be running some walks open to all levels of ability from the Epicenter and Ambleside out onto the local fells and over onto the local trails. So I'm really looking forward to that. It's going to be every Thursday now for the next 6 weeks. It kicks off the Epicenter and the shopping store that Arc'teryx have with the Epicenter. I'm really looking forward to that. I'm going to be a handful of people just heading out, walking into the fells. And even if you're a climber, you don't walk too much, you might pick up a little something from the walk. Could be a little bit of navigation. We could just be chit-chatting about the history of the local area, or it could be even some pointers, some local crags if you're up here going rock climbing. So get into that as well, through the Epicenter, which is the shopping Ambleside. And I guess lastly, I just wanted to sort of, mention to you, I mentioned at the beginning, it's the Arc'teryx Access to Climb campaign. And we're really excited to offer you a climbing day as a sort of competition prize for attending this webinar, which I hope you've enjoyed this evening. I've tried to cram as much as I can into the time we've had together, but you can imagine, we can triple that time just talking about top roping, just talking about equipment. But I have done a series of shorter videos on some of those aspects on the ISM website, which is the International School of Mountaineering. So you might find there's a knowledge resource on there, and videos I did through lockdown on bits of kit, clothing and things like that, layering pieces that might help when you're buying your kit or looking at planning or looking at organising yourself for rock climbing this summer, or even in the Alps further afield. So bear that in mind. But if you are the prize winner, you can bring a friend along, a partner, whatever, and we'll have a great day out together. And what I'll do is I'll tailor that day to your level of abilities. It doesn't matter if you haven't climbed before, or it doesn't matter if you lead climb, at whatever grade. I'm sure I can really help, with that sort of pathway moving forward, develop your skills further, give you food for thought, and give you a great fun day out. So Arc'teryx will contact that winner. It's going to be a random thing, and they'll email you tomorrow. And I'm sure Victoria behind the scenes there will do that and get in touch with you. You can then get in touch with me. We can arrange some dates, and we can have a fantastic day out here in the lakes. And if you do have a day, stay another day and practice some of those learned skills at maybe some of the crags we talked about during the day. So it could be a fantastic weekend for anybody that's on the call tonight. And I think Victoria said we're going to be recording. Tonight, so you can look back through it if you need, if you've forgotten anything. But there's some good resources out there. I am guiding, but I'm in the office sometimes. So if you do need any advice or any help at any time, please get in touch, get inspired. Get out there climbing. I'd love to give people pointers and then see them out on the crags. If I can do that, I will. You know, anything like that, please get in touch. And just wanted to sort of say thank you very much for your time. You know, get in touch. Victoria, get in touch with you. And really thanks for sort of tuning in tonight. It wasn't long enough. I can sit here talking for hours, but thanks again. And a big shout out to Jim Tomley. I think he's been on the turbo trainer for the last hour doing his exercise when I next meet him next Thursday at the Epicenter walk. But take care, guys, and many thanks again.